Smoke rose from the scarlet Ducati like a whispered omen, twisting above Motegi's asphalt as if the bike itself were exhaling its secrets. Yet Pecco Bagnaia never blinked, never faltered, never surrendered to fear. What the world saw as the shadow of failure was, in truth, the outline of something greater, the thin, trembling line between collapse and immortality. His Desmosedici, wounded by an oil leak that kissed the exhaust with each violent heartbeat, should have been a liability, but in his hands it became a symbol of resilience disguised as fragility. If they had stopped me, the pain would have been deeper than any injury I ever carried from the track, he admitted, his voice raw with the weight of what nearly slipped away. The telemetry revealed nothing catastrophic, only temperature spikes, subtle vibrations, and numbers dancing on the edge of trust, but the human drama was immeasurable. Ducati refused the panic button, refused the safety net, and by doing so gave their rider the most precious fuel of all, belief. Each plume of smoke was a cruel reminder that the machine might betray him at any second, yet also a declaration that faith in man and machine could bend fate itself. Bagnaia transformed doubt into precision, carving apexes like a surgeon who knows his scalpel may break but chooses to cut deeper anyway. Fans gasped. Rivals waited for implosion, but instead came a victory heavier than any statistic, richer than any clean, trouble-free race could ever offer. It was not speed alone that won Japan, it was the courage to ride through imperfection and turn weakness into legend. And from that trail of smoke, every key moment of the Japan Grand Prix unfolded. Bagnaia's defiance, Ducati's faith, Marquez's coronation, and the rise of a dynasty written in fire and steel. The moment the checkered flag fell over Motegi, the image etched itself into the collective memory of MotoGP. Pecco Bagnaia's scarlet Ducati streaking across the finish line, trailing a faint, unsettling smoke like a wounded animal still determined to run. Spectators leaned forward with hearts clutched, convinced disaster would strike in the final laps, yet the bike refused to surrender, its Desmosedici heart still pounding with relentless rhythm. Inside his helmet, Pecco whispered to himself, "If it holds one more corner, I'll carry it to the line," a private vow that blended fear with courage. Ducati Corsa's pit wall was tense, engineers' eyes flickering across telemetry screens that showed temperature spikes in the exhaust system, a minor oil seal irregularity hidden behind the aerodynamic fairings. The public only saw smoke, but the truth was deeper, buried in the engineering codes and diagnostic whispers that never reached television microphones. "It's not that we didn't understand the problem," Dalligna told journalists afterwards with calm defiance. "It's that not every problem needs to be explained." The words carried the sharpness of a scalpel, cutting away speculation to reveal Ducati's true philosophy: execution first, analysis later, secrecy as strategy. The bike became a paradox on wheels, simultaneously fragile and unbreakable, like a violin string stretched to its absolute limit yet still producing music. Fans gasped at every plume, commentators raised alarms, but Bagnaia never flinched, his body language tighter, his lines through turn 11 sharper, a man coaxing performance from a creature on the brink. That smoke, curling white against the Japanese sky, was not just an omen but a metaphor, a reminder that every triumph in motorsport is built on the edge of collapse. Ducati trusted their champion, and in that trust lay a psychological empowerment far greater than any mechanical reassurance. Bagnaia's inner rhythm remained calm, each lap a dialogue between instinct and faith, between what the data whispered and what his soul screamed. The Desmosedici GP24, with its hidden network of sensors and the ultra-lightweight titanium valve system, humming dangerously close to thermal limits, showed the world what engineering courage looks like when filtered through human will. On the pit board, the numbers glowed steady, no panic messages, just the silent vote of confidence. Continue, believe, endure. He wrote as though the smoke was a cloak, not a curse, transforming mechanical imperfection into symbolic resilience. In that instant, he became more than a racer. He became an interpreter of fragility, an artist painting with speed and uncertainty. Ducati's refusal to reveal the exact cause was not arrogance but theater, controlling the narrative, ensuring that rivals were left guessing, shadows instead of schematics. Bagnaia later admitted that for a moment he feared the bike might betray him, but the very act of choosing to trust it gave him the edge he needed. Journalists wrote about risk, engineers wrote about probability, but history will remember only the image: smoke behind, victory ahead. It was the kind of finale that MotoGP rarely grants, a scene suspended between collapse and glory. And when Pecco raised his fist across the line, the climax crystallized into a single truth that no technical report could ever contain. Sometimes, the fastest way to win is to embrace the possibility of failure until it becomes your fuel. Victory in Japan was not merely measured by the stopwatch, but by the weight of resilience. A double triumph that began with pole position and ended with Pecco Bagnaia raising his fist while the smoke still lingered like incense from a battle altar. Every lap of the weekend was shaped by tension, from the surgical precision of qualifying to the merciless rhythm of the race where rivals pressed hard but never broke his composure. Inside the cockpit of the GP24, Pecco admitted silently, "I must stay calm, no matter what I see, no matter what they see," as if speaking directly to the ghost of doubt that haunted his visor. Pole was not luck, but the mathematical marriage of grip, geometry, and timing, as Ducati's new adaptive ride height device trimmed fractions of a second with ruthless efficiency on Motegi straights. Yet what defined a narrative was not raw dominance, but how a man and machine handled imperfection in the glare of millions. He looked like he was carved from granite, one rival engineer said afterwards, watching replays of Bagnaia's body locked low, knees skimming curbs. "I set on destiny." The paradox of calm under fire became Ducati's greatest weapon, a psychological edge sharper than any titanium valve or carbon brake. The double victory was not only a scoreline but a statement, proof that even smoke could not obscure the light of certainty. Fans described the ride as unshakable, while insiders noted how Ducati's ECU algorithms were recalibrating torque delivery to shield the stress components from collapse, a secret ballet of electronics hidden beneath the spectacle. In this subtle orchestration, the rider's confidence became paramount, for numbers mean nothing without the courage to trust them. Bagnaia's calmness was a mirror to his team's philosophy: results over explanations, faith over fear. It was as though the Ducati was a glass bridge suspended above an abyss, creaking yet intact, and Pecco walked across without glancing down. Each lap after qualifying supremacy confirmed his authority, but the race's true essence was distilled in those moments of smoke and serenity. The resilience displayed was not only technical but spiritual, a defiance against fragility dressed in red and roaring at 18,000 revolutions per minute. Rivals saw vulnerability, but Bagnaia turned it into theater, commanding the narrative as surely as he commanded the apex of Turn 5. Ducati's engineers, usually obsessed with dissecting microdata, instead stood silent, letting trust in their rider eclipse the impulse to intervene. And that silence, heavy with meaning, became louder than any telemetry printout. Bagnaia's double win was like a candle burning bright against the wind, fragile, flickering, yet refusing to extinguish. For the journalist's pen, it was resilience. For the rider's heart, it was vindication. For the factory's philosophy, it was the perfect embodiment of their creed. The climax of the weekend was not just the crossing of a finish line, but the proof that sometimes victory belongs not to the flawless, but to those who thrive while broken. Dominance in MotoGP is rarely pure. It is forged from the marriage of chance, talent, and machinery, yet in Japan Ducati seemed to embody inevitability itself, as if destiny had been painted red. The weekend unfolded like a symphony, Bagnaia's return to form providing the melody, while Marc Márquez's crowning of the World Championship thundered like percussion. It was not just a race but a convergence of narratives, a collision of rivalries turned alliances, and the unmistakable scent of history being written in real time. Marquez, once the immovable obstacle, now wore Ducati red and with it carried the aura of inevitability, a presence that unsettled the paddock before his tires even touched asphalt. Bagnaia whispered to himself on the grid, "I cannot let him be the only story. My fight must still matter," and that private declaration transformed into the controlled fury of his ride. The technical staff worked with the cold focus of surgeons, adjusting fuel mapping to manage mid-race consumption, while calibrating the whole shot device to its millimeter limit, knowing each detail would count in the theater of perfection. "I never imagined a day like this," admitted Daligno with rare vulnerability, his voice quivering in post-race interviews. A title, a 1-2 finish, and proof that our philosophy has reshaped MotoGP. Such words, simple yet loaded, cut through the noise, revealing the emotional toll of years spent chasing supremacy. Ducati's dominance was not merely statistical. It was visual, visceral, like a tidal wave swallowing doubts and scattering rivals with irresistible force. The metaphor crystallized on track. Two red torpedoes slicing through Motegi straights, aligned in mission yet distinct in identity, a duet of past and present harmonizing into a terrifying future. Engineers whispered about the data avalanche collected by their multiple satellite teams, a technical advantage that turned racing into an algorithmic ballet where every detail fed into a greater whole. Honda and Yamaha, once monarchs, now looked like ghosts wandering in Ducati's new empire, their machines fast in isolation but powerless against the weight of combined strategy. Bagnaia's victory in Japan was sweet, But Marquez's title sealed a sense of inevitability, a perfect weekend that felt more like a declaration of dynasty. The paddock buzzed with unease. Could anyone truly match the scale of Ducati's machine, both human and mechanical? The riders themselves admitted, off record, that the Scarlet bikes felt like a different category, a step ahead in every corner, every launch, every late break. Journalistic eyes saw not just success but the unsettling possibility of stagnation, a grid dominated too completely by Bologna's might. Yet fans felt only awe, the kind born of watching two titans share the same garage, one rediscovering form, the other confirming legend. For Marquez, the championship was a resurrection. For Bagnaia, the double win was a reclamation. For Ducati, it was the arrival of an age that seemed unbreakable. The climax was not in the trophies lifted, but in the silence that followed, as rivals stared at their notes and wondered if they were watching not a season, but an era being born. And in that silence, Ducati's dominance became more than fact. It became prophecy. When Ducati announced Marc Márquez would join their ranks, the paddock trembled with disbelief, for it was not just a transfer but a tectonic shift in the sport's balance of power. This was the man who had tormented them for nearly a decade on Honda, the relentless figure who denied them glory time and again, and now he would wear their colors, embody their cause. The gamble felt reckless to some, a dangerous invitation for chaos inside a team already filled with champions, but to others it was genius, a stroke of vision beyond the short horizon of politics. Inside his own thoughts, Marquez confessed quietly before his first Ducati test, "If the bike gives me its heart, I will give it my soul," words that carried the weight of years lost to injury and the hunger of a man unwilling to fade. Technically, the marriage was extraordinary. Ducati's Desmosedici GP24, already a weapon of precision, now had a rider capable of exploiting its most ferocious qualities: late braking stability, seamless corner exit torque delivery, and adaptive ride height deployment through Motegi's notorious hairpins. "When I signed Marc, I was convinced it was the right decision," Gigi Dall'Igna declared, "but even I could not have imagined such an outcome," his voice betraying the pride of a strategist vindicated. The decision had roots in Gresini Racing's audacity, the pairing of the Marquez brothers in 2024 that softened barriers and created chemistry, a subtle rehearsal for the main act. Ducati seized the moment, offering Marc not only a seat but the structure, data streams, and resources to revive his legend. The risk lay not only in the politics of power but in Marc's physical state, for few believed a rider once broken could again dominate in a field so merciless. Yet he returned with ferocity, carving victories with surgical precision, transforming doubts into ashes with every apex taken as if drawn by compass. The metaphor became unavoidable. Ducati had once feared him as fire, now they wielded him as lightning, unpredictable and devastating, striking where rivals least expected. Engineers noted how Marc adapted to Ducati's seamless shift gearbox faster than predicted, leveraging its microsecond transitions to maximize drive out of Motegi's turns, a detail that proved decisive. The season soon revealed that Ducati had not merely gained a rider, but had acquired an aura, the psychological hammer of inevitability that broke rivals before wheels turned. Bagnaia, initially wary, found in Marc not just competition but inspiration, a shared obsession that elevated both. The combination was dangerous but intoxicating, like a storm held in human form, shaking the grid to its foundation. Journalists searched for fractures, stories of ego clashing, but what they found was something more unnerving: harmony laced with tension, an alliance forged by necessity, made more potent by its fragility. The decision to sign Marquez was no longer controversial. It was destiny crystallized, Ducati's boldness rewarded beyond measure. Rivals whispered of betrayal by fate, that the one man who once stood against Bologna had now become their spearhead, cutting open new horizons. Each victory became a confirmation, each podium a warning, until resistance felt like denial. And the climax of this gamble, written in Japan, was proof eternal. Ducati did not just sign a rider, they signed inevitability itself. Two alpha predators sharing the same cage is not a promise of harmony, but the beginning of a dangerous symphony, and Ducati now holds the baton with Bagnaia and Marquez under the same roof. On paper, it is the strongest lineup MotoGP has ever seen, a fusion of raw instinct and methodical calculation, yet in practice it resembles a delicate glass tower built on shifting ground. Bagnaia knows his worth, the reigning champion whose precision is admired like a master watchmaker, and Marquez arrives as the storm, the 8-time champion whose instincts can bend destiny. How long can two suns share the same sky? Pecco asked himself in a quiet moment, aware that history rarely tolerates equals. Ducati's garage now feels less like a workplace and more like a stage, every glance between teammates weighed by journalists, every silence loaded with interpretation. We manage riders as we manage engines, quietly, efficiently, without unnecessary noise. Daligna told reporters, his words sharp as steel, designed to project control. The secret of leadership style that served him in mechanical puzzles must now confront the unpredictability of human rivalry. Technically, Ducati ensures parity. Both GP24 machines receive identical updates, each fitted with the latest swing arm modifications and revised carbon fork settings to leave no excuses for division. But parity can also fuel paranoia, and riders who live at the edge of milliseconds often perceive shadows where none exist. The metaphor becomes irresistible. Two rivers flowing powerfully, beautiful when parallel, but catastrophic if they collide. Marquez thrives on instinct, often overriding data with his uncanny feel for grip. Bagnaia trusts analysis, sculpting lines through careful synthesis of telemetry and precision. These contrasting philosophies, once in opposition, now share one garage, one strategy room, one podium. The challenge for Ducati is not to build speed, they already own that, but to prevent implosion under the heat of ego and ambition. Engineers murmur about the tension as data debriefs stretch into silence, with Bagnaia's calm gaze fixed while Marquez gesticulates wildly to describe sensations no sensor can capture. Journalists, sensing blood, circle like sharks, eager to spark narratives of division. Yet so far Ducati's secrecy has kept the story within walls. Daligna orchestrates this balance like a conductor who knows one wrong cue could turn harmony into dissonance. The fans, enthralled, sense history being sculpted in real time, unsure if they are watching a dynasty's rise or its fracture. The climax looms not in mechanical limits but in human ones. Can Ducati contain two kings without breaking the crown? For now, the Red Fortress stands, resilient and terrifying, yet everyone knows the hardest races may not be against Yamaha or Honda, but within Ducati itself. And the truth lingers, unspoken yet undeniable. Sometimes the fiercest opponent is the man who shares your garage. The smoke that curled from Bagnaia's Ducati at Motegi was more than a mechanical anomaly. It became a living metaphor, a visual reminder that in MotoGP victory is never clean but always carved from risk, resilience, and raw determination. Fans gasped as the haze followed him, not knowing whether it was the prelude to disaster or the strange halo of a champion refusing to surrender. Engineers, however, recognized the telltale signs of a compromised oil seal near the exhaust junction, a minor irregularity with major symbolic weight, a hidden weakness laid bare for the world to see. Inside his helmet, Pecco told himself, "Ignore the smoke, listen only to the tires, the engine still sings to me," transforming fear into focus. Ducati's decision not to pull him in was not negligence but faith, a deliberate gamble that told their rider he was trusted beyond data. "We knew what was happening with Pecco's bike," Daligna later admitted, "and we knew he would make it to the finish," his words quietly defying the critics. The moment redefined the relationship between rider and machine, as if the Desmosedici, wounded yet unbroken, demanded to be believed in like a friend staggering through battle. The metaphor deepened, smoke not as a warning but as a veil, shrouding fragility in the theater of strength, like a candle flickering furiously but refusing to go out. Every lap Bagnaia completed was an act of defiance, a dance with uncertainty that elevated the spectacle into legend. Rivals saw vulnerability, but what they missed was the psychological transformation. Ducati had turned fragility into empowerment, and Bagnaia rode as though carrying a secret no one else could touch. The technical detail mattered less than the emotion, yet it was still staggering to note how Ducati's ECU controlled excess fueling to reduce exhaust pressure, quietly buying time for its rider to finish. Fans watching from grandstands saw not numbers, not telemetry, but courage etched into red livery, each plume of smoke drawing cheers rather than gasps. The symbolism stretched further. MotoGP itself is a sport defined not by flawless machines but by flawed victories, moments where resilience speaks louder than perfection. Bagnaia's triumph was thus not just about speed, but about mastering imperfection with grace and precision. Journalists compare it to art, a painting where cracks in the canvas only made the picture more powerful. The climax arrived as he crossed the finish line, smoke trailing like the tail of a comet, not a failure, but a sign that even weakness can propel greatness. For Ducati, it was vindication of philosophy, secrecy, trust, and execution over the endless dissection of detail. For Bagnaia, it was proof that courage under pressure could be more decisive than horsepower. And for the sport, It was a reminder that sometimes the machines that look like they're breaking are the ones writing the most unbreakable stories. In the end, the smoke was not a threat. It was a crown. When the race was over and the storm of adrenaline began to fade, Pecco Bagnaia was ushered toward the monitors, where the images of his Ducati trailing smoke were played in merciless slow motion, each plume now stripped of its urgency and transformed into spectacle. At first he smiled with disbelief, pressing his palms together as though in prayer, his body language betraying a mixture of relief and astonishment at what he had unknowingly carried to the finish line. The team laughed nervously around him, the danger already dissolved, but his eyes betrayed a momentary shiver when he realized how close he had come to losing it all. Had they forced me to withdraw, it would have been a devastating blow, a wound far deeper than any injury I ever suffered on the track, he thought, and for an instant, the joy of victory was shadowed by the specter of what might have been. The engineers explained calmly that it was oil dripping onto the exhaust, harmless to performance yet theatrically dramatic, a technical hiccup that looked far worse than it was. Si mancava chemi fermacero quando ero in testa, he joked with a crooked grin, a half-serious quip that revealed both relief and the razor-thin margins separating triumph from humiliation. The scene was almost comical, the champion watching himself ride through smoke clouds like a matador dancing with fire, unaware that millions held their breath for him. Yet beneath the laughter lay something deeper, an understanding that trust is the currency of racing, and Ducati had invested fully in him at the moment it mattered most. The metaphor became inevitable. He was like a tightrope walker who only afterward looks down and realizes how far the drop truly was. Bagnaia's internal monologue wrestled with paradox, fear of what might have been, gratitude for what was, and pride for having transformed fragility into dominance. Ducati's refusal to panic had given him the psychological shield to ride as though nothing was wrong, proving once again that the invisible is often more powerful than the visible. Journalists caught the image of his astonished expression at the monitor, hands clasped, eyes widened, the embodiment of both relief and rebirth. It was a rare glimpse of vulnerability from a rider often described as clinical, a moment when the armor cracked to reveal the human pulse beneath. In that laughter, in that sigh, lived the essence of MotoGP, speed balanced against fragility, joy always shadowed by risk. Technically, it was trivial, a gasket misbehavior oil, touching heat, but narratively it became enormous, the spark of drama that gave the victory its unforgettable taste. The climax of the weekend was no longer just the checkered flag, but this replay, the realization of how thin the line between victory and disaster had been. Bagnaia's relief turned to pride, pride turned to humor, humor turned to poetry, and in those transitions the champion reclaimed his humanity. For fans, that moment at the monitors was as memorable as the race itself, because it showed that even the fiercest competitor can be astonished by his own survival. Ducati's gamble had paid off, but the man who rode through smoke gave it meaning, transforming engineering risk into human story. And in the end, as Pecco walked away from the screen, he carried not only a trophy but a revelation. Sometimes the most beautiful victories are those that almost slipped away.